Good afternoon. I hope that your second day of Noyce is going well. We're going to get started with some of our programming. And I have just a couple housekeeping notes that I want to remind folks. I was, if you came in earlier, you might have heard me gently encouraging people to sit up towards the front. I was saying that to everybody. One participant specifically asked me, like, "Are you saying that because I'm short?" And I said, "No, I'm saying that to everybody. Saying that to everybody." I think they said exactly vertically challenged, so we're going to get my nomenclature correct. I just want to encourage you all as you are coming in. I know that people are kind of coming in and out of as you're prepping for workshops or for posters or different things like that. If the doors are closed, please do us all a favor and kind of, use a couple extra seconds to really slowly close the doors to try to minimize the noise, because with so many doors, it just gets a little loud in here. So while plenaries are going on, if you don't mind helping us out with those, that we are very appreciative. And then two, all kidding aside, we just want to make sure that as many people can kind of come in and see. We have some kind of like backfill seating in rows, but just if you don't mind sitting towards the front, not a requirement. We do encourage you to kind of make some space. And we know that people need to pop in and out for different obligations. The other thing that I wanted just to let you all know about, I don't know if there are any other like higher ed policy data nerds like me. I encouraged everybody yesterday to tell your story. I am a recovering faculty member. Thank you for accepting me. My field is social science. I am actually, my background and my PhD are in higher education. And my way into this work around STEM equity and excellence really came from, I was telling some people in line at lunch, really came from an experience of, I'm a first generation college student, and while I was the first person in my family to go to college, my sister was the second. And while I was working on my PhD, I was really working hard to help my sister graduate college. I feel like I worked harder for her BS than mine. Part of what led me into this area of research and this inquiry is because I'm the lightest skinned person in my family, and my sister was experiencing a very different higher education system than I experienced. And that really led me to asking a whole bunch of questions. I mean, I wish I could tell you that it's just because I'm so much smarter than her. But that's just not the case. She's brilliant. And so those experiences are so foundational and fundamental, right? I went to a Title I school. I grew up in a family where, one of my parents was incarcerated for several years. And those experiences of teachers who saw something in me, cultivated that work, cultivated classrooms of joy and curiosity, those experiences matter so much. And so I really want to encourage you all just to, kind of continually hear these experiences all around us of how important teachers are in our lives. And those experiences with our families and our communities that really lead us into our careers and our lives. I'm so grateful to my own family for all of the sacrifices they have made to help my sister and I, achieve college degrees and things like that. And so that leads me into a space where this morning, you might have seen me over here in particular, we hit the 10 o'clock hour, and while I was rapidly or kind of focused listening to our panel of the voices from the field, which incredible panel, right? Incredible to hear from the voices from the field. But yeah, kudos. And those suits, sir. Yes. But I was also continually refreshing because from 10 to 11 in June, on Tuesdays and Thursdays in particular, SCOTUS decisions come out. And so because I am truly a nerd and higher ed is my life, I was rapidly refreshing my my phone to see if the Harvard and UNC cases, the opinions had come out. They did not come out today. I would have shared that with you earlier. But they will come out this week. They will come out either on Thursday or Friday. We know they have to come out by Thursday and Friday. So Thursday, between 10 and 11, I'll be checking my phone. And if they don't show up on Thursday, I know they'll be happening Friday. And as soon as those decisions come out, because they will have profound impact on all of your institutions, unless you're in one of the 10 states that already have barred race-conscious admissions, we will be then immediately diving into probably what will be a 300 or 400 page network of decisions. There will be dissenting opinions and concurring opinions, but for different ideas, right? And that's a lot of work to digest. And so one of the things that we wanted to share is that we have already lined up a group of experts to help institutional leaders, faculty, deans, provosts, VPs for enrollment. We're already lining up a public town hall to help institutional leaders navigate that decision that's coming up. So we only have about a week before this webinar town hall kind of will be going on. There's a QR code. Please feel free to grab it. We'll make sure you get a copy of this. Please share it with your own colleagues. But one of the things we do with AAAS, and in particular our Sea Change initiative, is that we help institution leaders navigate these sorts of complex issues with an eye towards the law-attentive ways to respond to the parameters set on public and private institutions of higher education. So we just want to let you know that we know that this is heavy on people's minds. And as a part of that webinar, what we'll be doing is giving you our first blush, what we could discern within 1 week around the ruling, how does this affect institutions, and also what can you as institutional leaders do to ensure that you mitigate the chill that naturally happens. When this first passed in California, it took them 12 years to return to pre-enrollment levels because the decision had a chilling effect on students enrolling in college. We want to make sure that we're mitigating that chill effect, and part of that is the way that we communicate our institutional commitments to our communities, our institutional commitments to our students, to our alumni, and to that work. So we'll also be discussing a tremendous amount of evidence-based race-neutral strategies that institutions can use to increase access across their communities. So I just wanted to make sure that you all had this at your fingertips. Again, please share broadly, widely. This is just an open, free town hall webinar for us to help institutional leaders navigate these complex issues. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to keep us rolling on to our plenary and the very exciting speaker that we have with you.
Next time, at the end. Ooh, you're so much taller than me. So much. Thanks, Travis. Hello, everyone. I hope you had an enjoyable lunch and were able to connect with colleagues. My name is Suzanne Thurston. I am the Deputy Director in the iSeed unit at AAAS. I work on K-16 programs and have for the last 23 years at AAAS, and programs that, and initiatives that support inclusive and equitable student learning and career pathways. Before joining AAAS, I was a teacher in Augusta, Maine. Anyone from Maine? Woo, right over there in the corner. I love that. From Augusta, Maine, in the same district where I grew up, and in the district where both of my parents were dedicated teachers. I always look forward to attending this conference because it gives me an opportunity to connect and learn from such talented and committed educators. And I wanted to give a shout out too to the panel, the Voices from the Field panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your experience. It was fantastic. Before I welcome our plenary speaker to the stage, I want to share a bit about a program that AAAS is leading in collaboration with more than 115 organizations, from education to industry to nonprofit to foundations, called the STEM Opportunity Alliance, or SOA. In December, AAAS co-hosted a White House summit on STEM equity and excellence, where we announced the launch of the STEM Opportunity Alliance, an initiative to secure STEM equity for all by the year 2050. So we have time, and it's a big lift, but I hope as you learn about it a little bit more that you'll be part of the process. SOA will address key areas to attain fundamental systemic change and ensure the diversity that is necessary for increased performance and innovative ideas that are needed to keep the United States competitive. Throughout 2023, SOA and its alliance partners have been hosting events across the country, We've had, how many so far, Travis? 8? No, 6. So, and we're going through the year, so you might see one in your area. So we'll host events across the country to convene thoughtful stakeholders to co-construct a national strategic plan for equity and excellence in STEM, the first of its kind in America. We hope that you will get involved in this work and share your experience and knowledge. We will share information about the SOA program in the Whova app, so keep an eye out for that. Our next speaker is one of those thought leaders, and his organization, Micron, one of the largest producers of semiconductors in the world, is a leading partner contributing to the STEM Opportunity Alliance. That's not me, is it? No. Dr. Robert Simmons currently serves as the head of social impact and STEM programs for Micron Technology and the Micron Foundation. Dr. Simmons leads all social impact, philanthropy, and STEM programming in North America. As a member of the Diversity Scholars Network at the National Center for Institutional Diversity at the University of Michigan, his research for the last 15 years has focused on racial equity, STEM education, and the lived realities of historically and systemically marginalized communities across multiple K-12 contexts. More specifically, he explores the experiences of Black students and teachers, equity in STEM, and the lived experiences of Black fathers. Dr. Simmons has authored numerous publications in top-tier journals, as well as in popular media. His next book will focus on the experience of Black STEM teachers in urban and rural schools and Black fathers' love for their sons identified on the autism spectrum. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Robert Simmons to the podium.
Good afternoon. My mic on? Mic check. 1 2 1 2. Hip hop heads in the house? Nobody? No hip hop? It was all a dream. I used to. Hey, come on. Hey, there we go. Come on, people. This ain't AERA. You know what I mean? Let's call it what it is. You know what I'm saying? I'm excited to be here and, you know, just to be amongst people who care about issues of equity and justice. And I consistently say to people when I talk about the work that we do from a philanthropic and a programmatic perspective, but also the work that I've done over my career as the son of civil rights activists who went to Morehouse and Spelman. Any Morehouse Spelman crowd folks here? Oh, shout out. Okay. My mother just became a Golden Girl, so the whole party, and it cost me money because she told me I had to donate. So I don't know what that's about. And so for me, the work around STEM equity isn't just about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's about improving the justice conditions of young people and communities. And I always tell folks, like, if you don't want me to talk about justice and you just want me to talk about DEI, you should uninvite me, right? And I'm commonly uninvited when I say that. As one of my mentors and good friends, Dr. David Stovall always says, he always says to me from a very young age in academia, Simmons, look, when you start talking about justice, they uninvite you. So we're going to talk about justice today. So if y'all don't see me again, Travis uninvited. All right. And so as I think about the work that we're doing at Micron, I want to start with centering self, because justice work starts with self. Justice work doesn't start with trying to fix other people. Justice work doesn't start with trying to understand other people. It starts with understanding self. I am from a place where being home before the street lights meant just that. I am from a place where the smell of country ham over easy eggs and grits started the day. I am from a place where 8 Mile Road is more than a movie, but the dividing line between city and suburbs. I am from a neighborhood around the corner from the Detroit Rebellion in 1967, which wasn't a riot, but the voices of the unheard. I am from a place where I hated high school and struggled to maintain a 2.0 prior to my junior year, a place where I was only the second black man to become a tenured professor at Loyola University, Maryland. I am from a place where much of what I know about education I learned from my middle school students in the Detroit public schools. I am from the legacy of black fathers who love their black sons and remain afraid for them on a daily basis. I am from my ancestors' blood and sweat in Tennessee, factory workers in Detroit, a Spelman-educated mother, a Morehouse-educated father who was incarcerated the majority of my life. I start with this because oftentimes we decenter self when we think about academia. We center things like how many citations your paper has. And all of those things are important to a certain degree. Because in order to do real equity and justice work, you have to be in touch with who you are and your own positionality in the world. You have to unpack and explore your own identity, because that will help you determine how you fit in spaces and how to navigate in spaces. Most of my peers and colleagues and really close friends were like, man, you mean you're gonna work at Micron in corporate America? Someone who started out as a teacher and a community organizer. I'm like, yeah, it's interesting, right? Not only that, there's a small percentage of black folks working in the semiconductor industry. In fact, on the technical side, less than 3% of engineers and technicians are black women in the semiconductor industry. So when I think about my journey, it's important for me to center that I show up as I am everywhere I go. As a sneakerhead, I'm going to talk about sneakers and the STEM of sneakers, which is a program we run. And people are like, what? Like, yeah, you can't make and design sneakers without understanding STEM, right? We're going to talk about the STEM of hip hop. I was raised on hip hop. I was raised listening to the sweet melodic sounds of Slick Rick and Children's Story. Any hip hop heads know Children's Stories? Okay, I'm making sure some of y'all in the crowd now. We're going to have to get Travis, we're going to have to get that on the next playlist. Okay, just making sure. I learned about STEM and I fell in love with STEM because hip hop and STEM saved my life. I grew up amidst the crack cocaine epidemic in Detroit. Despite my father's Morehouse education, he was incarcerated doing hard time at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. The moment I knew that hip hop and STEM changed my life was when I left Leavenworth to see him the one and only time my grandmother made me go. And what I realized was I do not want to end up here. I also knew that it wasn't a criminal justice system, that it was a prison industrial complex. And there were intentional things that happened in the lives of far too many people that put them on this pathway. Many of my teachers told me, you're gonna end up just like your father. Because I had this thing with 1 foot in the street and 1 foot in the classroom. Where one day they pulled up on my block and they decided they were gonna do stop and frisk. And I was in the wrong place at the wrong time and had to go to jail. And I spent that night and my mother's, I'm calling like, Mom, are you coming to get me? She hung up the phone. I'm like, oh. Next day, one of my mentors showed up, city jail in Detroit. I'm like, why y'all ain't come get me? She said, well, if you want to be a thug, you need to hang with them. I was like, I don't want to do that, so let me get my life together. 3 weeks later, my uncle, who was the Lorenz Tate from Love Jones in the 80s, those know Love Jones? All right, cool, pop culture references. We can do that in STEM, y'all know, we can make, okay, cool. And I decided I'm gonna show them that I love STEM. And my uncle was also a DJ. Like back when DJs actually spun albums, where they would go with the crates. So I go downstairs to his studio. He had a dark room. He was a real Renaissance man. I'm thinking I'm gonna be a tinkerer. I'm gonna take apart his turntable. Ooh, child. Anybody ever, ooh, child. I was on punishment. And listen, all the researchers in the room, my mother and my grandmother, they ain't listen to none of the research about spankings. I don't know what it was, but I couldn't sit down for a while. My uncle comes home and he like, hey, look, man, I'm gonna knock your lights out next time. I'm like, you can't do that, I'm gonna call social services. He said, well, you call them too. I was like, all right. And at that moment, my mother says to me, this right here, this hip hop thing and your love of tinkering and taking things apart, it's actually gonna save your life. I'm gonna send you to Camp Nissikony. I was like, Camp Nissikony? For those that know Michigan, where's the Michigan crowd? Remember Michigan? What up, though? Any Detroiters, like for real Detroiters? Come on. What up, though? Okay, got it. So you gotta check people when they say they're from Detroit, and then they like really from Farmington Hills, because we take that kind of personally, like you ain't from the city. For the DC folks, y'all know how it is. I'm from DC, my wife is from DC, hardcore, like literally from the city. People say, oh, I'm from DC, and she'll look at them like, where are you from? Well, I'm from Prince William County, you ain't from DC. Just saying, we're petty like that. And so my mother sends me to Camp Nissikony, and it's a STEM camp, but it's like overnight camp, way out in the middle of the woods in northern Michigan. I'm like, it's dark out here, there are no city lights, like what? And this was pre the movie Get Out, right? So I didn't know anything, but if you'd have done that to me now, I'd have been like, man, this is like a bad movie. Like, what are we doing here? But what I realized is that I made lifelong friendships at this camp because of STEM. Many of my closest friends, we've known each other since a very young age because of the YMCA and Camp Nissikony. It was phenomenal, but it was dark. So for a kid from Detroit where it was all about the street lights, growing up on Livernois Retirement in the city, let's see my man back, he like, oh yeah, Livernois Retirement, ain't no joke over there, right? Like I didn't know anything about the dark. And I was afraid. But what I also understood was that STEM and hip hop could take me places that my father didn't go. That STEM and hip hop could take me outside of a world that existed only in a dream. When Biggie said it was all a dream, I used to read Word Up magazine. He was telling his story about how hip hop changed his life. Biggie also talked about going from ashy to classy and how hip hop changed his life. So as I think about my work as an academic, still serving, shout out to my colleagues from American University. I still have a visiting professorship there as a scholar in residence and a scholar of antiracist praxis. So I still write, which my kids are like, dude, you're just writing these long papers. What are you doing? Does anybody read this, Dad? I'm like, I don't know, maybe. I like it, it's like therapy. But my teacher thought I was smarter than I was, so I was. And this is important because the work in this room isn't about citations. The work that I do at Micron isn't actually about getting people to come and work at Micron. Don't tell them I said that. It's about young people and educators falling in love with hope. And it's this idea that in order for young people to fall in love with hope and chase their dreams, you gotta have teachers who are gonna nurture that. You have to have researchers who understand nuance of the human condition, that there's no one story, that there are multiple stories. This idea of the work that you do being important to get tenure, being important to write grants, is critical to the work that we do in our democracy. There are those that want to silence the type of research that many of you do in this room. Hello, somebody. There are people who do not want you to do some of the research and work that y'all do. But here's the thing. If you don't do that work, then other things don't happen. There are educators, K-12 teachers on the front line day in and day out, making sure that young people believe in themselves and realize they are smarter than they were. Deborah Peak Brown, who just retired, and she ended her career at Michigan State University. Any Spartans in the building? Oh, a couple Spartans, okay. Wow, see, they get rowdy too. Let me stop with the Spartans. They get real rowdy and turned up. Okay, shout out. And Deborah Peak Brown was my teacher. And I sat in her science classroom in a lab and watched the Challenger explode. I remember it vividly. And I was inspired to see a teacher in space, because I always wanted to be a teacher. And I always wanted to be a STEM teacher before STEM was a thing. And I cried. I was like, what do you mean? Sally Ride's dead? Like what? I was devastated as a child. I was devastated because that was also the first time it never occurred to me that Black people went to space. Like, go figure. What do you mean there was a Black astronaut out there that was like, what happened? And I was so intrigued by the science of it all. All of us are in this room because of a teacher. A teacher told us that we were smarter than we were. A teacher believed in us. Some of us, like myself, did things in school in defiance of some teachers. But I also did most things in school because of the love that I had for my teachers. And in Detroit, I didn't know that there was a diversity thing in teaching because all of my teachers were Black in Detroit. So when I got to Loyola, and then I think about being a doctoral student, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do my dissertation on, and my dissertation chair was Paul Gorski. And Paul's like, yo, you should study Black teachers because that's what you're interested in. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, man, you got to go read such and such and such and such. And you know, for anybody who's ever met Paul, he's into books and articles. And he gave me a whole bunch of them to read. And I'm reading the work of Dr. Ladson Billings. I'm reading the work of Michelle Foster and Black teachers on teaching. I'm like, yo, this is a trip. Because all I had was Black teachers. And a good friend of mine, Sharif El-Mekki, who runs the Center for Black Educator Development, we always talk about this and how we were just shocked that, what do you mean people don't have Black teachers? What do you mean they're not? It was Detroit. Everybody was Black. I'm like, this is news to me. But it's because of Deborah Peak Brown that I stayed in love with STEM. And it's a rhetorical question, right? Who was the teacher that made you fall in love with your craft? Who was the teacher that told you you were smarter than you were. Because those teachers are the ones that we need to celebrate every single day. In this context and in your work, and you think about applying for grants from NSF, how does your work celebrate the legacy of teachers as hope dealers? Because if you have to ask yourself that, then you should stop doing your work. And I say that in all seriousness. It's like when I talk to teachers and I'm like, look here, if you don't love kids and care about kids like they're your own, you should quit. Just saying. Because as a parent of 2 black boys, if you don't love my babies, you need to leave them alone. And let me find a Miss Chupp, who was our son's first black teacher in 2nd grade, and true story, in Fairfax County, stood on a chair when they said he missed the cutoff to be in the level 4 gifted and talented program by 2 points. Miss Chupp stood on that chair. And Miss Chupp said to me, I would stand on that chair every day of the week to fight for John Simmons. Our youngest son had Miss Mary. She fought for him to be in the high-functioning autistic class. Because they were like, oh, well, he just has a speech delay. She was like, nah. And one of my closest colleagues, Sarah Irvin Belson, has rode with me through it all. When I call her like, I don't know what to do with this boy. He's 6 years old, telling me about number blocks, and 6 sets of 4 are 24. I'm like, dude, you know that at 6? The boy is highly gifted. But the point of the matter is that his teacher, Miss Mary, fueled that, but I also had a teacher and a colleague at American University who helped support me through that. Because the reality of it is that we need friends, colleagues, and co-conspirators for justice to do this work. I want to say it again. We need co-conspirators for justice. This is not to kind of dispense with the whole allyship. I got it. I hear you. I don't need you to be my ally. I need somebody to co-conspire with me so that my black boys are safe in America. I want to talk a little bit about this from a research perspective and a paper that I'm working on and some of the things that we're learning through the Micron Foundation and our work. And I want to talk about minding the gap as kind of the research topic that I want to address. When we think about the concept of diversifying the teaching workforce, I want to be clear. I am talking about racial diversity of teachers. Okay? That's what I'm talking about. And we can talk about all sorts of other ways of thinking about diversifying the teaching workforce. I am specifically referring to race and minding the gap. And when I'm talking about minding the gap, and I think about the research that I'm currently doing with black STEM students in universities, part of the construct of the research is largely centered around them telling me what has made you feel safe. There's a lot of research out there that's very technical. Well, they need scholarships. They need all of these. They need calculators. But what we need to embrace is STEM identity development. Do young people of color, in particular, feel safe in STEM spaces that are not designed for them? The current CEO and head of TechBridge Girls, Nicole, is amazing. If you aren't familiar with the work of TechBridge Girls, would encourage you to Google her right now. I don't care if y'all don't hear nothing else I say today. Google TechBridge Girls and the amazing work that they're doing. And what they're basically arguing is that it is not enough in STEM to say we need more. What has to happen is that you can't bring young people of color into a burning house that does not belong to them, where they don't feel a sense of community. And one of the things that I'm thinking about, and in my conversations, when we think about 3 leadership lessons, right? It's this idea of will. And part of it is NSF has given away a lot of money over the years. How much money have y'all given away over the years? A lot of money. Foundations, schools, all of these places. And I always say to folks, yes, money is great. But if you don't have the will to change a flawed system, our efforts will not work. So the question becomes in this room, do we have the will to challenge frameworks that reproduce inequities? Do we have the will to stand up for students? The second piece is hearing ears and open minds. And here's the thing, right? In the semiconductor industry, I enjoy going to meetings, but I always say to folks, are you hearing me though? Because there's a difference between saying, yeah, I'm listening to you, but that doesn't mean you're hearing me. Oftentimes, we invite folks into spaces, whether we're talking about teachers of color or people of color in STEM. They want to have their employee resource group. Raise your hand if you know this story. You go to the employee resource group, but nothing is discernibly different about your experience in the company or the university as a result of being in this employee resource group, other than you have great happy hours. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything is different. And so what I'm learning in the research is that, are we willing to hear with an open mind from those closest to the pain and the opportunity? Or do we walk in with assessments and judgments already made? The third part of this work that we're continuing to explore is the idea of cultural humility. It takes a lot of strength to be self-reflective. A whole lot of strength. Because when you're self-reflective, I'm always self-reflective because I'm a Detroit Lions fan. In order to remain a fan of Detroit Lions, you have to practice self-reflection and ask yourself, why do I spend my money on these tickets every year? But I fail at self-reflection because I continue to do it. Self-reflection means that you're also going to change the way in which you show up, change your habits, but also name ways in which you experience a level of privilege. Through this research with this group of students, one of the things they've talked about is their favorite teachers in K-12 and faculty members at their universities are those that practiced cultural humility. It wasn't so much that their faculty members or their teachers were content experts. That was important to them. But one of the things that's super important to this group of young folks is cultural humility. The faculty member who says, I can't even empathize. I just don't know what to say amidst what's happening in society with the tragic murder of George Floyd, Sandra Bland, et cetera, et cetera. Same story when I've talked to young folks who come from tribal communities, where going to college is the first time that they've left their community. This idea of cultural humility is so important. Because you have to be willing to do that critique of self. And here's the thing, right? Self-reflection is the school of wisdom. Now, I don't know who originally said this, and I know it's an academic crowd, so we got to give correct attribution according to APA. But my attribution is my granny. My granny would always say, my grandmother was from New Market, Tennessee, and had a 4th grade education. My grandmother would always say, Don't get too big for your britches. I see my man nodding his head. Did somebody tell you that too? See? Don't get too big for your britches. That's all about self-reflection. Because when you get too big for your britches, you start to bust out of them and your butt crack is hanging out, as my granny would say. It's true. She would tell me that. And then you get all cold and shivery because you're not honest with yourself. And these are some of the questions that we're continuing to explore with our partners through the work that we're doing at the Micron Foundation. As we think about changes in our work, as we think about our programmatic work and how do we approach communities. And listen, when I had my team go to Atlanta, where's the Atlanta crowd? Anybody from Atlanta? Yeah, what up? Okay. I was born at Crawford Long when Crawford Long was actually Crawford Long. Now it's like some fancy like Emory, no shade to Emory, I'm just saying. Crawford Long was just like an institution. But anyway, I digress. So I had my team show up to Atlanta to do Chip Camp, one of our signature programs. And I said to them, yo, we're going to do this with the AUC. And they were like, what's that? I was like, oh, Jesus, got work cut out for us. Right? It's a true story. I took my staff, all white. I'm going to drop you off at Spelman. And I'm going to have my mother show up. My mother's class is 73. So she's an OG, 50 years, golden girl. She's like, oh, yeah, I'll educate them. I was like, all right, y'all on your own. Leave them there. I came back. They said, oh, yeah, we're doing Chip Camp right here. And we're going to talk about the first black woman who graduated with an engineering degree from Georgia Tech. She wasn't truly a Georgia Tech student. She was a daughter of Spelman, the first graduate of their 3-2 program from the class of 73. We built in this level of consciousness to our program because I had my staff take on this self-reflection. So as we think about this work, I want to close with some comments about the work that we're doing at Micron, our partnership with NSF. Can I talk about that? Is y'all good? Okay, cool. I'll make sure. I mean, it's probably too late now because it's like out in the okay, yeah. So one of the things that excites me about our work at Micron, both on the corporate side and the foundation side, is the ability to do public-private partnerships. It's one of the things that's really important to our democracy. It's one of the things that's important for corporations to be good citizens and think about their responsibility to communities and their responsibility to young folks and educators. So we announced our public-private partnership with a $10 million collaboration with NSF. It was $10 million, right? Somewhere around in there? Okay, I'll make sure I got the number. Well, somebody at Micron gave me this slide, so if they didn't, I would like talk to them. And one of the things that we're excited to do is partner with Noyce, right? And so a portion of our funding is going to support Noyce and research, RET, research education teachers, is that? Research experience with teachers, y'all know the whole. STEM settings for something with teachers, got that, there you go, right? All right, y'all got, I looked at the solicitations, I'm like, no wonder when I was an academic, like maybe a couple times in my career, I felt like reading that thing, like, you know, y'all need to shorten it, like just a little paragraph or something, a couple lines, you know, dumb it down for me. But the point of the matter is that with this $10 million, we're committed to this work, we're committed to funding this work, and this is just the first step. And this is historic for Micron, because Micron, prior to my position at the company, we didn't do a lot of funding for teachers. We did a lot with kids, but one of the things that I have said to folks, both in the semiconductor industry with chips and science, is that you cannot say we need more people of color and women and girls in tech companies and not do the same in teaching. Because there is a saying, what we see is what we will become. And we need to mirror that. And we're excited to partner with NSF on this and work on the second Dear Colleague letter. And so we had another fund that's largely very technical, but there is semiconductor education attached to it. So we're excited to be in partnership with the group. STEM from Dance is another one. Would encourage folks to reach out. I'll make sure folks have my email address, but we're building the first funder collaborative in New York. And we're working with the Community Foundation. We're big on funder collaboratives to make sure that we can provide resources, not simply for research, but also programming. Just found out today that this funder collaborative has spawned an additional $1 million to add an additional multiple weeks of programming in Syracuse. For those that know anything about Syracuse, Syracuse has the highest child poverty rate of any city in America for a city over 100,000 people, right? So this is important because I've also said to folks in this funder collaborative, if we get these ridiculous rules that these funds can't pay for food for kids, I can't rock with you. So we're gonna make sure that young people have hot meals for breakfast and lunch, those that wanna take food home, that they have food that they can take home. Because we want to make sure that we're doing our part. And we're excited for what's to come with STEM from Dance. As of this morning, we have enough funding to add 2 more cohorts, so it'll be a full summer programming in partnership with STEM from Dance. For those that are in New York City, check out STEM from Dance. They are an amazing nonprofit run by Yamile Tucson Beach, who is a MIT grad, was a teacher, and decided she wanted to do something at the intersection of STEM and the arts, STEAM as we say these days. We also announced the Micron Nonprofit Leaders of Color Fellowship Program in partnership with Georgetown. Anybody from Georgetown here? Oh, they don't come to this? Okay, may have to switch institutions. Anybody want to partner with us on this? Cool, perfect, yeah. So y'all see they not here, so I'm gonna have to pick up the phone, call the president. And we're on cohort 2, and one of the things that we're excited about with this fellowship is that we guarantee unrestricted funding to our fellows up to multi-years of $25,000 or more. We're now on cohort 2. And so we're really excited about this work. Would highly encourage anybody in this room to apply. We've had a couple of people from higher education apply in cohort 2. And so most universities are nonprofits. And one of the things I've always said to folks is that for many academics, where their whole career has been spent in academia, understanding how nonprofits work is really helpful to how you think about your craft, as researchers, professors, as those who are educators, and also those who are directly running nonprofits. How do we support the work, support teachers, work with universities? Well, we have Chip Camp Jr., which is a program that we run that we work with universities across the country. It's no cost. It is the only elementary 3 through 6 semiconductor education program in the country. And it is something that we do with numerous communities. Can we play the video real quick? Do I have time to show the video?
Everybody who was close to me all stayed on dry land. So now I'm driving back on Interstate West. I just gotta feel something. Not gonna wait till the morning, because something's gonna change my mind. I don't wanna change my mind. Oh, I wanna stay right here, chilling with my friends for another year. I would walk away from the spotlight, go the good life. Come on, turn your hate into poetry, pain into power, enemies to friends, and your minutes into hours. I would walk away from the spotlight for the good life, for the good life. Send my best friend an apologetic text. He says to come over. There was dancing and talking and steaks on the grill, and I think that I will be alright. Not gonna wait till the morning. Let's never put the night on ice. Never put the night on ice. Oh, I wanna stay right here, chilling with my friends for another year. I would walk away from the spotlight for the good life. Oh, come on, turn your hate into poetry, pain into power, enemies to friends, and your minutes into hours. I would walk away from the spotlight for the good life, for the good life. And they all said I was crazy for leaving my money, but
The reason why this is important is that this was done in rural Idaho. Anybody from Idaho here? Oh, what's up? Okay. It probably took you like 6 flights to get here. Okay, got it. I was just in Idaho, my colleagues. And the reason why this is important is that Idaho is a massive state. Things are really far apart. When I said to the team, we need to reach rural communities, and we're going to start in Idaho. And the team thought I was crazy because we'd never done this before. And I always say to them, that's an even better reason to do it. Call me when y'all figure it out. We need you to come and help us do this. So we ride out to Wilder, Idaho, largely migrant Latino families. And I tapped into the Spanish that I learned living in Santo Domingo. My team was totally surprised, right? Now, they didn't have any El Presidente in Idaho, but I certainly got an El Presidente when I went back east, right? Anybody know El Presidente, Dominican beer? All right, yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. They sell it in DC. If y'all need hookup, I'll let y'all know where it is. And the point of the matter is that we did this collectively and collaboratively with families, with the YMCA, the College of Western Idaho, because as we think about our STEM education work, I'm not here to sell it to you because it's free. Like, we give it away. Like, we don't charge for the work that we do. What we do is ask for partners who are willing to put in the sweat equity to do the work. And when we talk to the YMCA and when we've talked to others in rural communities in particular, it is hard to do a lot of this work in many rural communities that we work in. We recently announced a partnership with the Onondaga Nation. Part of it is both learning from them about the original STEM, the architects of STEM in North America were the indigenous people. The land was STEM. The land is STEM. And we're excited for what we're learning from the Onondaga Nation. And I say this because I mean it wholeheartedly. All of the work that we do is done with the spirit of collaboration. When I think about the work, how we collaborate with others, these are the 4 tenets of our work. We're here to work with you. We're here to fund the work as a foundation. We're here to bring programs as far away as the University of Washington at Tacoma. We're doing Chip Camp there. We're doing the first Girls Go in Tech program. We run Girls Go in Tech, but we're doing Girls Go in Tech with an organization called La Liga, and it's going to be all in Spanish. We're doing a semiconductor education program in a museum. We'd love to work with you on museum education and museums doing this work. We're not tinkering around the edges at Micron. We want co-conspirators for justice and STEM. In closing, I want you to think about what it takes for your work to allow young people to be found. Not the size of the grant, not the number of publications, not the number of programs that we would do at Micron, but what's our own personal responsibility to ensure that young people and teachers will be found, that they will be heard, that we acknowledge their expertise, that we acknowledge their wisdom. Students are at the core of our work. We operate with a lot of grace and forgiveness because we all make mistakes. But as we think about the work, I want to encourage you to take a look at the You Will Be Found STEM from Dance performance. It's a video clip. I want to play the first 45 seconds, and then we're going to stop the video because I want to save time for any questions or answers that I can provide. So let's play this for 45 seconds, and then we'll close with some Q&A.
Have you ever felt like nobody was there? Have you ever felt forgotten in the middle of nowhere? Have you ever felt like you could disappear? Like you could fall and no one would hear? Well, let that lonely feeling wash over.
I close with that video from our partner, STEM from Dance. Their work is amazing, but it's all about our collective work, allowing students and teachers to be found, to not be alone. So my challenge to this room, what can we do together so that teachers can be seen and that young people can be found? Thank you so much. No questions? No? Oh, I go sit down now. Oh, Travis. Oh, got it. There's a mic. Do you need me to come to the mic?
Not unless you have a question.
No, I don't have any questions.
There's also a mic over here. I'm happy to come to folks.
Hello. Okay. A little nervous about asking this because I don't want it to be taken the wrong way.
Yeah.
All right. Has anybody ever asked you at any time in your life or going up to speak here, have they ever said, can you give us the Black perspective on this? And
The Black perspective. I'm not following.
Has anyone ever told you that? Because
no.
I've heard some people say that they've been told that.
That I've been told that?
Well, no, not you.
I'm not following.
I've heard that some people are kind of been put on a pedestal, like they have to speak on behalf of, like, you know, an entire people or an entire label that they represent. Has anybody ever made you feel like that?
Nope.
No? Lucky then. So I guess that's a quick question.
But what makes you say that? If I could ask you, like, what makes you say that?
Well, I'm from Maine.
Say that one more time.
I'm from Maine.
Okay.
And, well, where I'm kind of growing up, like, my dad sort of made it a policy that if you ever needed help, then you kind of have to advocate for yourself and stand up for yourself because nobody else will. And I remember one time, you know, sort of an unrelated thing where I was trying to get help in school. I was telling some of my teachers that I was diagnosed as high-functioning autism, and they kind of look at me and say, huh, you don't really look it. And I feel like it's kind of odd because then I get asked questions about, like, what that meant, and I feel like I can't really say what that meant because, you know, something like autism, it's like an entire spectrum of things, and I can't speak on behalf of everybody with autism.
And I guess my response would be it's the same thing for me, right? Like I feel like there's a nuance to the Black experience in America. I have one perspective of what that's like. My youngest son, who's 6, experiences the world as a high-functioning autistic Black boy. his perspective on the world as he gets older is going to be very different than mine. There will be some intersections, but there also is nuance. In the same way that I think about what it means in tech, when I think about people of color, like that's a very broad term in the same way that I would say there's no real API experience. Well, one, API is a misnomer, but we could talk about that over a drink. But the point of the matter is that there's always nuance to perspectives. There's nuance in communities. The ways in which people in Detroit experience the rebellion is very different depending on where you live. Right? And so I think for me, I offer my perspective. I'll offer my perspective and bring voice to those that I have interacted with as a researcher, but I certainly think that you are going to be asked that. And so I have never been asked that, but I am hyper aware that that is a perspective that people may have. But yeah, so that's my response.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and shout out to Maine. Glad you came from Maine. No doubt.
Hi, my name is Embrina, and I came here from the rural part of Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania. And first of all, congratulations. That was such an inspiring
Thank you.
talk. And I think one theme that sort of is very unifying, listening to you, listening to Dr. Billings yesterday, and my own experience, because in rural Western Pennsylvania, there may not be as many people of color, even something similar to myself. But I think the struggles and the challenges for our young generation, they're very similar.
Yeah.
And in many cases, and what you just said, I think our students, especially the elementary and secondary level students, I think one of the things that really could be a making or breaking point is finding that one person who cares.
Yeah.
It may just be your mother. You said you called your mom over the phone. They didn't show up right away, but the next day they were there.
Yeah.
And then they were thinking about it. That's why they sent you to the camp. And they did something about it. I think finding that one person, it may just be a family member or somebody like myself, a professor or a teacher, I think that's my takeaway from a lot of conversations that I've heard during this conference for both days. And thank you so much for the perspectives that you presented today.
Yeah, one thing I will say is that I also think this is where public-private partnerships between universities and corporations are really important, because there are a lot of employees at corporations who are from the communities that are in rural America or that are in cities that have a particular life story, but oftentimes, at least from my experience at the foundation and on the corporate side, people are quick to say, well, can Micron fund or can Micron bring this program to rural Pennsylvania? The answer is 9 times out of 10, sure. There may be some nuance and some challenges, but oftentimes we don't get the question of, well, do you have employees that would be willing to mentor or volunteer and just come to lunch with our students? And at Girls Go in Tech, we do this speed networking experience. And throughout the country, about 73% of young people who participate in Girls Go in Tech end up connecting with a mentor who comes out of this speed networking experience. Of this 73%, we have found that between 14 and 19% of them end up getting a job at Micron, and 100% of them end up staying engaged in tech. This is not Simmons conjecture. But the point of the matter is that if we're very intentional about bringing corporations and corporate foundations to the table to be partners in terms of bringing in volunteers and so on and so forth, it'll happen. And there are a huge chunk of folks in corporate America where they have 16 to 24 hours of paid volunteer time. So there's a lot of opportunity, not just simply for corporations to give money, to give equipment, but also to give time through partnerships and collaboration. So Travis, you look like you're telling me to go sit down. So.
No, I actually have a question from our app. if you don't mind.
On the app.
The highest rated, because you can vote in Whova. If you aren't tracking along, that's the way you get those points. I see you on the leaderboard, y'all. But the highest voted question is actually, you made a comment earlier about how hip hop saved your life, and there's a lot of people that want to know if there's more to that story. And if it's too long, we can also
it's pretty brief. I grew up in Livernois Retirement, and the zip code 48210 in Detroit, even to this day, was known to be very violent, right? And so my first introduction to a handgun was from older friends of mine who were in the underground economy. And one of them was a hip hop artist and was deeply connected to the hip hop shop. And for those that know the history of hip hop, the hip hop shop spawned a lot of hip hop legends out of Detroit and the United States. The Wu-Tang Clan in the early days would come to Detroit and perform at the hip hop shop. It was hot, it was sweaty. It was like old school, like room just for hip hop. And one day when there was a lot going on in my neighborhood, I was at the hip hop shop. And the corner that we hung out on was shot up by a rival group of people in my neighborhood. Had I not been at the hip hop shop, I would have been on that corner. So for me, when I say hip hop saved my life, it's not just figuratively, it's very literal. And so for me, I've taken to really encouraging teachers to embrace the ethos of hip hop and sneakers, because in particular for many young folks, it's a great way to build a relationship. As a sneakerhead, I've had more conversations with young people about sneakers before I ever get to STEM, right? And in this mentoring project I'm working on with some colleagues in DC, we took kids to SneakerCon here in DC at the convention center. And these kids were like, yo, I had no idea that this sneaker thing was a culture. And it led to us building relationships. And so for me, hip hop saving my life is both figuratively in some aspects, just because, I listen to it and consume it, even the randomly ignorant hip hop that 50 Cent does and Lil Wayne and some of their interesting behaviors. And there's also this for me, that hip hop allows me to stay honest with myself, but also challenge the ways in which, as a consumer, I embrace a consumer culture and the hypocrisy of hip hop around misogyny and embracing hyper masculinity. It allows me to challenge myself and be a better father, but still saying to folks who are like, oh, I can't believe you like hip hop. And I'm like, it's the United States of America. We all live with some level of hypocrisy, right? Because we got to go shop. We got to buy something. So we all contribute in some way, shape, or form. And so for me, hip hop has saved my life, and it's allowed me to build better relationships with my sons, especially our oldest son, because of my travel schedule. I travel 60 to 75,000 miles a year. So there are times where I'm not home for a basketball game, but I also know that we can talk about it because we built a relationship where we talk about sneakers. And he has this thing about the Ja Morant sneaker, so I'm kind of on the fence about that, which is a whole other social matter in and of itself. But again, because of our relationship with my relationship with hip hop and my relationship with sneakers, and being socially conscious and raised by civil rights activists, I can say to him, I'm not paying for Ja Morant sneakers, and here's why. Now, if your grandmother wants to or your uncle wants to, that's on them. But I'm not doing that. Now, you can get some LeBrons, because I prefer LeBron. He's not the GOAT. I'm still a Jordan guy. But the point of the matter is that socially, my son and I can have that conversation. So that's my hip hop story. And shout out to Detroiters who know the hip hop shop. Any Detroiters know the hip hop shop? That's how you know you old, if you know the hip hop shop. This means you're old. Hip hop shop ain't even there anymore. So, well, all right, Travis, am I good? Yeah. I'm good. Thank y'all. Everybody have a great week.